Thank you, Orlando, and I'm delighted to participate in this forum seeking justice and accountability for the, as Armando just mentioned, what is in effect a failed criminal state, but which has a global consequences, and its tentacles are affecting the whole rules-based international order. 3 years ago, the Organization of American States established what they called an independent panel of legal experts. I was one of them, with two Latin American judges as well, to look into whether there are reasonable grounds to believe that crimes against humanity were being committed in Venezuela. That's the threshold that the Rome statute of the International Criminal Court establishes for determining whether crimes against humanity are being committed. 2 years ago, after extensive examination of the documentary evidence, the witness testimony, public hearings, and the like, we determined that 7 major crimes against humanity were being committed and had been committed since 2014 in Venezuela, which included, and as I speak, they are continuing, multiple murders and extrajudicial executions, thousands of arbitrary arrests and deprivations of liberty, egregious cases of torture. Justice Manuel Robles Ventura, a member of our panel, said these cases of torture were the worst that he had seen in all his 20 years as a member of the judiciary. Number 4, rape and sexual violence, particularly targeting people in detention. 5, forced disappearances. 6, underpinning each of the crimes against humanity, persecution on political grounds. And finally, and my colleague Michael Levitt mentioned this in the most disturbing crime against humanity of all, state-orchestrated humanitarian suffering, the weaponization of food and medicine, where we witnessed hundreds of thousands of preventable diseases and deaths, and more than 5 million Venezuelans have been forced into exile. And so 6 months later, 7 countries, including Canada, made the first ever collective referral to the International Criminal Court of a state party, Venezuela, for these 7 major crimes against humanity. But to date, the International Criminal Court special prosecutors not yet opened an investigation, let alone begun any prosecutorial initiatives. Our report was followed, and reference has been made, so I won't go into it, by investigative reports by the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. And I met with Michelle Bachelet, where we discussed the situation in Venezuela. And in the last month alone, we have witnessed a series of violations that demonstrate that not only have these crimes not abated, but in fact, these major crimes against humanity have intensified. Let me just identify 3 of the more compelling violations that have occurred in the last month alone. The first is a dramatic increase in forced disappearances, the criminalization of dissent and torture of disappeared people in detention. Second, the suspension or cancellation of all the opposition parties, whether we are talking about popular will or justice first or democratic action, making, in a word, any idea of free and fair and open elections in Venezuela simply impossible. And 3, an ongoing assault on the rule of law, on the independence of the judiciary, indeed on democracy itself. And so the question is, what do we do? I say this because while my colleague Michael Levitt correctly observed the importance and compellability of the criminality in Venezuela for Canadians and for the international rules-based order, regrettably, I have to say that the crimes against humanity in Venezuela, all the other assaults that have been referenced so far, have disappeared from international engagement. They are not on the radar screen as a priority for governments and parliaments and civil society as it must be. And so let me just, in a series of one-liners, for reasons of time, just identify a number of specific objectives that we need to undertake. Number one, to revisit and reaffirm the collective call for an investigative inquiry by the ICC for crimes against humanity by Venezuela. Two, and it has not yet been done, initiate a complaint before the International Court of Justice against Venezuela, which is a state party, for its violations of the Convention Against Torture, to which Venezuela is a state party. If we can't move forward yet on the ICC, we should at least move forward with the International Court of Justice, and that will in fact help support the initiative re the ICC. Number three, we need to initiate prosecutions on the basis of universal jurisdictions in respective countries and territories where this escaped criminals are themselves hiding out, or in fact are continuing to conduct themselves with impunity. And I'm delighted that we recently established what we are calling a Venezuelan Accountability Network under the leadership of the former Special Prosecutor of Sierra Leone, David Crane, for that purpose. And we, our Raoul Wallenberg Center, will be cooperating with him, and we hope that this will be an important civil society initiative in that regard. Number five, we need to invoke the UN special procedures and remedies. For example, make representations to the UN Working Group on the Disappeared regarding the growing number of disappeared in Venezuela. And I recently spoke with the chair of the UN Working Group with regard to that. Also, our Raoul Wallenberg Center, in concert with other organizations, is initiating, as we speak and as we meet, an initiative, a special complaint procedure before UN working groups on the independence of the judiciary, on torture and the like, regarding the horrific torture, persecution, and prosecution of Judge Maria Lourdes Afiuni. The Afiuni effect has become well known as having a chilling effect on any independence of the judiciary or the rule of law. And so we are documenting the kind of torture in detention, assault on the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary through the looking glass of the pain and plight of Judge Afiuni's case. Number six, we need to hold parliamentary hearings in our respective jurisdictions, as we held under the chair of Michael Levitt in Canada, but we need to replicate this as much as we can in various jurisdictions. Number seven, we need to enhance Magnitsky sanctions and combat the culture of impunity. As more countries adopt Magnitsky sanction initiatives, more countries have to implement those sanctions against Venezuelan officials. Number eight, we need to establish an interparliamentary alliance on Venezuela. Recently, we established an interparliamentary alliance on China, which in fact is one of the countries supportive of Venezuela, as has been mentioned. But what we need to do is to bring together, as we've done with the one on China, bring together parliamentarians from the democracies coming together in common cause from Latin America, from North America, from the European Union and beyond, in common cause in order to secure justice and accountability. And I would say we need, along with that, an intergovernmental alliance, an alliance of the community of democracies who will combat the kind of axis of repression where China and Iran and others are joining together with respect to supporting the criminal state in Venezuela. And finally, we need to provide desperately needed humanitarian relief of an independent character to Venezuela's suffering people as we move forward to secure justice for the people of Venezuela and accountability of the human rights violators, starting with the leadership of the Maduro regime. Thank you.